A Ming emperor chased immortality so hard that people inside his own palace tried to kill him while he slept. No invading army, no battlefield. No heroic assassin jumping over rooftops. Just the emperor, his bedroom, a rope, and a plan that almost worked. This was the Jiajing emperor. He ruled one of the largest empires on Earth. He was surrounded by walls, guards, rituals, ranks, servants, and rules. And yet danger reached his bed. That is what makes this story so disturbing. The palace was supposed to be the safest place in China. Instead, it became the place where the emperor nearly stopped breathing. The incident is known as the Runyan Palace Incident. The name sounds calm. The event was not calm. It was a warning written in panic. If everyone around a ruler is terrified, the danger does not disappear. It moves closer. Sometimes it reaches the pillow. Before we get to that night, we need to understand Jiajing. The Jiajing emperor ruled the Ming dynasty in the 1500s. The Ming was a huge empire. It had grand cities, complex government, armies, taxes, rituals, and officials who could turn any problem into a very long document. Jiajing became emperor young. He was intelligent. He was stubborn. He cared deeply about ritual authority. And over time, he became increasingly obsessed with Daoist immortality practices. That means he listened to people who promised spiritual power, long life, special formulas, and all the usual things that make an emperor start making terrible health decisions. If you have watched the first episode, you may notice a pattern. Ancient emperors loved the idea of living forever. Unfortunately, their doctors and alchemists often had the energy of someone mixing soup in a chemistry lab during a thunderstorm. Jiajing spent more and more time away from normal court government. He did not like being bothered. He trusted certain favorites. He chased rituals and elixirs. And inside the palace, life around him became frightening. The people closest to an emperor were not always powerful in the good way. Sometimes they were powerful in the, if he gets angry, your life is over way. Palace women lived under extreme control. They had little freedom. They were surrounded by rules. Their status depended on the emperor, his moods, and the brutal hierarchy of the inner palace. This does not excuse murder, but it helps us understand the pressure cooker. The imperial palace was not just beautiful buildings and silk curtains. It was also surveillance, fear, competition, loneliness, and people trapped very close to absolute power. When absolute power has a bad day, everyone nearby feels the weather change. According to historical accounts, Jiajing's pursuit of immortality created especially disturbing demands inside the palace. Some accounts connect the incident to the production of substances used in Daoist longevity practices. The details are debated, and we do not need to turn them into gossip. The important point is simple. People inside the palace felt trapped enough, angry enough, or terrified enough to attempt something almost unthinkable. They tried to kill the emperor. The year was 1542. The emperor was sleeping. A group of palace women entered or gathered near him. They had a cord or rope. The plan was direct. No army, no manifesto, no dramatic speech about saving the empire. Just get close enough. Wrap the cord around his neck and end it. This is the kind of plan that sounds simple until you remember the target is the Emperor of China. If it fails, there is no plan B. There is only screaming, interrogation, and punishment. But in that moment, they tried anyway, and they almost succeeded. The cord tightened. Jiajing could not breathe. The most powerful man in the Ming Empire was suddenly not an immortal ruler. Not the son of heaven. Not the center of ritual order. He was a man being strangled in his sleep. That is the terrifying thing about bodies. Titles do not breathe for you. Palaces do not breathe for you. Armies outside the room do not breathe for you. If someone cuts off your air, you are just human. The attempt failed partly because the knot was not tied correctly, or the cord did not work as planned. One palace woman reportedly alerted the empress. Help came. The emperor survived. Barely. Imagine the panic after that. The emperor wakes up nearly dead. The palace realizes a group of women almost killed him. Officials outside the inner palace hear the news and immediately understand that this is not just a bedroom incident. This is a political earthquake. Because if the emperor can almost be killed inside his own private quarters, then what is safe? The walls failed. The guards failed. The palace hierarchy failed. The illusion of perfect imperial control failed. And for a ruler like Jiajing, that lesson must have been horrifying. The punishment was brutal. The women involved were executed. Their families suffered too. The empire made an example out of them. That is how imperial power often responded to humiliation. It did not just punish the act. It punished the embarrassment, because the attack had revealed something the system hated to admit. The emperor was vulnerable, not symbolically, physically, in the most private place possible. And vulnerability is dangerous for rulers who depend on appearing untouchable. After the incident, for the court, the question was not only who did this, it was also, how did this happen here? The emperor's private quarters were supposed to be the protected center of the protected center. The palace was a box inside a box inside a box. Outer city, imperial city, palace gates, inner rooms, servants, rules, schedules, ranks, guards, and still, danger reached the bed. That is why the incident was humiliating. It made the imperial security system look ridiculous. A rebel army failing at the border is one thing. A crisis starting beside the emperor's pillow is another. It means the danger was already past every official barrier. It means the system noticed too late. And systems hate being caught noticing too late. So the reaction had to be fierce. Not only to punish the attackers, but to repair the image of control. The empire had to say, this was handled. Order is restored. Do not think about how close it came. But everyone did think about it. Because that is the problem with almost successful attacks. Failure does not erase the memory. It preserves the question. What if the knot had worked? Jiajing became even more withdrawn. He spent much of his later reign away from regular court audiences. He relied on selected officials. He continued his religious practices. The machinery of government still ran, because Ming bureaucracy was large and stubborn. But the emperor himself became more distant. Think about that. A ruler nearly dies because people inside the palace are desperate enough to attack him. A normal lesson might be, maybe I should understand why my own household hates me this much. But emperors do not always learn normal lessons. Sometimes they learn. Trust even fewer people. And that may be the darkest part of this story. The attack was born from a world of control. Then the attack likely deepened the ruler's desire for control. Fear creates cruelty. Cruelty creates desperation. Desperation creates violence. Violence creates more fear. Congratulations. You have invented the palace blender. Everyone inside gets chopped. This episode also shows why the inner palace mattered so much. The outside court could pretend the emperor was a symbol, a dragon throne, a sacred ruler, a figure wrapped in ritual language. But the inner palace saw the daily human version, the tired emperor, the angry emperor, the demanding emperor, the man chasing formulas and rituals while real people had to live with the consequences. That is why inner palace history is often so revealing. It strips away the giant public image. It shows the ruler at close range. And close range is not always flattering. From far away, power looks smooth. From inside the room, power has moods. It has habits. It has favorites. It has punishments. It has punishments. It has people whispering after the doors close. The women involved in the incident were not generals or ministers. They did not command provinces. They did not write policy. They did not have armies waiting outside the capital. That is exactly why the event is so striking. People with almost no formal power tried to attack the person with the most formal power in the empire. That contrast is the whole story. When a system gives one person everything, and gives the people around him almost no safe way to resist. Resistance does not disappear. It goes underground. It becomes rumor. It becomes resentment. It becomes a plan whispered in fear. And sometimes, it becomes a rope. When people imagine imperial history, they often picture battlefields, generals, rebels, and ministers shouting in court. But the inner palace was also political. It controlled access to the ruler. It shaped his moods. It carried rumors. It held secrets. It was the place where the emperor was least guarded by public ritual and most exposed as a human being. That made it powerful and dangerous. The Jiajing emperor wanted transcendence. He wanted spiritual authority. He wanted long life. He wanted to rise above ordinary human limits. But the Runyan Palace incident dragged him brutally back to Earth. No matter how many rituals surrounded him, no matter how many titles praised him, no matter how many alchemists promised special formulas, he still had a neck. That is a very simple fact. But history often turns on simple facts. A hungry army, a locked gate, a missing heir, a bad road, wrong knot. In this case, the wrong knot may have saved an emperor's life. That tiny detail is almost impossible to ignore. The whole Ming Empire, with all its rituals and ranks and armies, briefly depended on whether a group of desperate palace women tied a cord correctly. That is both horrifying and absurd. Very on brand for history. The story should not be told as simple comedy. The punishments were real. The fear was real. The trapped lives inside the palace were real. But it also should not be flattened into a boring paragraph. Because this event reveals something huge. Absolute power does not make a ruler safe. It can make him more isolated. It can surround him with people who obey in public and hate him in private. It can silence complaints until they come back as violence. And it can make the ruler so distant from normal human limits that he forgets the people closest to him still have hands. Fear, anger, and nothing left to lose. That is why this story has survived. Not because it changed the whole Ming dynasty overnight. It did not. Jiajing continued to rule for many years. The empire did not collapse the next morning. But the incident gave history a perfect image. The emperor who chased immortality almost died in his own bed. The ruler who wanted heavenly power nearly lost to a rope. The man at the center of the empire discovered that the center was not safe. And after that, the palace must have felt different. Every curtain could hide a memory. Every servant could look like a question. Every quiet room could remind him that power does not erase fear. It only gives fear better furniture. So what is the lesson? Maybe do not create a palace where everyone is terrified of you. That seems reasonable. Maybe do not chase immortality so hard that your own household becomes a horror story. Also reasonable. But the deeper lesson is about the limits of power. An emperor can command armies, collect taxes, approve laws, punish officials, and make people bow until their knees hate them. But he cannot force people to feel loyal. He cannot make fear become love. He cannot turn a trapped palace into a happy family by decree. And he cannot become immortal just because everyone is too scared to tell him he is human. The Runyan Palace incident is weird because the image is so shocking. An emperor, a bedroom, a rope, a failed knot, a palace full of panic. But it is powerful because it shows the hidden cost of ruling by fear. If everyone around you is terrified, you may think you are safe. But sometimes fear is not a wall. Sometimes fear is a fuse. And one night, inside the Ming Palace, that fuse almost reached the emperor's bed. The strangest detail is not only that the attack happened, it is that the emperor survived partly because the plan failed in a small practical way. A knot. A cord. A few seconds of panic. The fate of a ruler briefly depended on something that ordinary people understand better than imperial ritual. Whether the rope worked, that is why this story sticks. Jiajing wanted to rise above ordinary human limits. He wanted spiritual power, long life, and distance from normal weakness. But the palace reminded him of the simplest truth in the world. An emperor still has a body. A ruler can frighten people into silence, but not into loyalty. And if fear fills every room, one day the room may answer back. For Jiajing, it almost answered with a rope.